Hello and welcome to the Adulting Well Show. I'm your host, Joshua. I'm here with Kevin, and we're doing something a little different this time. We just finished recording our Ian MacKaye episode, and we're kind of decompressing from that, and I thought we would just chat for a bit before this one. What do you think, Kevin?
I think it's a great idea. So, a couple of quick things. We did not do any kind of pitch at the end, so I just wanted to remind people that we're donating money to Hospitality House SF through the end of the year. If you give some money to our Patreon, that's where it will go. Check them out, hospitalityhousesf.org. And then
you should say why we weren't able to do that, because
I was a little excited.
we ended up talking for like what, 45 minutes. It just kept going. We ended the show and we were doing our normal, like, okay, here's how the tech works, like, you can close your browser, whatever. Right. And then he just started telling stories.
Yeah, we stayed on the air with Ian after the interview, and I wish we would have recorded it.
I know,
because it was fantastic. But you know what? It was also nice to get that like personal moment and talk about some things that maybe weren't necessarily for air. You know,
right.
So it was a fantastic interview. I've been a fan of his music as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And
it's always good to tell people about stuff they can't listen to.
And that isn't me being I guess what we got to do. I just was like so overwhelmingly excited. I didn't want to hang up. So it was a great interview, I thought, and he's just a really right on guy, and it just was a lot of fun.
So I thought it was powerful because you told me that your father just passed away right before we recorded this interview.
Yes.
So you're kind of on the heels of that, going into what I imagine for you was a very big personal interview for you, like a big moment for you.
It was. And my dad was one of those dads that came to see my bands play as much as he did not like the music that I was playing. And he was a hell of a guy. I actually posted his obituary on Facebook for his friends and our family and other people. And it's just the outpouring of love and support has been almost completely overwhelming. Like I knew he was a good guy and I knew he had a lot of community, but I had no idea. Like I really, like, people the way you know them. And my dad and I were really close.
Yeah.
We were close with each other. Like,
you knew him as your dad. You didn't know him maybe as this guy.
Yeah. So, we've gotten my mom has gotten a lot of emails and a lot of letters, a lot of flowers, a lot of love. And, I just like, I can't even like, I can't actually put into words how truly impactful it is right now, especially with such little personal connection face to face.
Sure.
It's been really nice. And I think, so I'd like to also dedicate this episode to him because I think he would have liked Ian. I think they would have probably stayed on the phone longer than the three of us did, telling stories to each other. And, they definitely both have the gift of storytelling. So I just like, and there's a lot of, there's just a lot to unpack when a parent dies, and and I don't want to make light of it either. It's a very, very somber time for me. But this show, working with you on this show and this episode especially right now was really meaningful, and it kind of is one of the things that keeps me going. So I just want to say to everybody that listens, thank you for listening to our show. It really means a lot to me, and our interviews are very personal. And we don't filter anything out unless specifically asked by a guest that we take something out. But that
even I might point out when I put my foot in my mouth, I don't erase it.
Yeah, we don't erase it. And so they're very personal, and they're very whatever is currently going on in the person's kind of stream of conscience. And it's a very different way, in my opinion, to do these kinds of interviews, because I know a lot of them are incredibly curated, and the questions are sent beforehand. And, so I really love what we do. I think it's really honest, and I appreciate everybody that listens. So,
Kevin, thanks so much for setting some context, but I think there's only one real question here. Did your dad prefer Engage or Siren?
I think he
hate least.
I think he preferred with Siren. Him and Brian and Joe Carr were very close. So
What?
yeah.
Your dad was close with Brian Zero?
Oh my God, my dad loves Brian. Loved him.
Brian Zero, I love Brian Zero too. He's definitely one of the weirdest guys I've ever met in my life.
I mean, adored. You know, my parents adore Brian. My mom went to Miriam. Yeah, my mom went to Miriam's memorial actually, and just hugged Brian. Would not let him go.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So
right.
So I think Siren is the sentimental favorite. I don't think they understood any of it. And we certainly argued over politics at that time. But I will say one thing I will give my dad a huge prop for is he went out his last Facebook page, last Facebook photo for his whatever his timeline photo or whatever profile photo has a Black Lives Matter banner around it. And
oh, jeez.
Yeah. So I apple tree, all that stuff. He was lifelong liberal and was the most inclusive person I've ever met in my life.
That's fantastic, man. What a great way to start the show. Thanks for listening, everybody, and stay tuned for Ian MacKaye. Hello and welcome to the Adulting Well podcast. I am your co-host Joshua, and I am joined, as always, by
your co-host Kevin. And on the show in this episode, we have Ian MacKaye. As most of you know, the founder of Discord Records and been in more bands than I can say in one breath. So, Ian, welcome. And thank you so much for doing this relatively late on the East Coast for us. We really appreciate it. I'm super excited to have you on.
Of course, no problem. I just want to clarify that co-founder of Discord Records.
Co-founder, yes.
Yeah,
of course.
One of four people, really.
Yeah. And that actually is important because I know people, all did a lot of work to get that going. So, we briefly touched on your new project before we started the show, but I kind of want to just talk a little bit about, the state of the world and what it's like for you. Because when we chatted on the phone earlier, you were there was a possibility of going doing some stuff, some family stuff. Kind of how are you doing with things that are going on, having a kid, all the stuff that's happening in the world right now? How is it in DC and Virginia area?
Well, I live in DC, and Discord House is in Arlington, which is just across the river. I imagine it's like most of the world. It's, there's a pandemic. The weather is a little bit odd right now. But in general, the way I think about things is that, you just have to dress accordingly. So obviously I don't have any control over the situation in terms of the pandemic. So I have to think, all right, well, I just have to accept that it's occurring and then try to figure out ways to navigate it so that I don't add to the problem, really. So I don't, it's a different life, but I feel pretty clear about things. It's just, just a different set of circumstances at this point. And not to make light at all of anybody who has suffered as a result of the illness or as a result of the economic, problems that are, have occurred and are sure to occur in the future. But I have to say it's like a natural disaster. And when you think about it like that, if it was a flood or a forest fire or an earthquake, these things, who can stop them? So you just have to contend with them. And I guess that's what all I'm doing is contending with them. And I don't, Amy and I have a 12-year-old son, but I think that, we've been doing pretty well. We've been hanging in there. And I think one interesting thing is that when the sort of quarantine stuff started, I think a lot of people were really felt at first, I think, were very challenged by the idea that they would be sort of in close quarters with the same people. But as somebody who is toured and toured and toured and toured,
Yeah.
you know, this actually being in close quarters with the same people, you know, I'm kind of used to it. And then having to accept each day as it comes, that's my life.
Right.
So
I think that's a really interesting point, because I've talked to a couple of friends about that, and you know, I did some touring in my early 20s, definitely not as extensively as you or as for many years, but you know, I felt like that was like the training ground. The biggest difference right now is this is kind of, I'm not always positive that I toured with people that I totally wanted to be with all the time, but I chose the group that I'm with now. Like
right.
fully committed as an adult, this is who I want to spend my life with. So I think it's a really, really good point. What has it been like with Discord during this time? Because I know when I ordered the record, there was some delays with getting it out because of you all not wanting to conflict with your distributor who couldn't open because they're here in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So is it, I mean, and you're very, I mean, to me, and maybe it's different for other people, but Discord has always been a very, you know, product sort of driven record label. Like I love getting the actual record, or at one point CD, and at one point before that record again, and actually having that tactile sort of thing. How's it been for you to kind of navigate that part of it?
Did you really just skip over cassette? Were you not a cassette kid?
I was a cassette kid, but
all right, sounds like you skipped right over that.
I always had an actual phonograph. So
yeah, can I tell you?
My dad was really into records, so that was kind of my thing.
When we put out, I think it was Repeater. Repeater sold something like 70,000 vinyl, like in the first year, and 120,000 cassettes. It was insane. Cassettes were so huge around 1990, 89 or 90. It's bizarre. Like we sold so many cassettes. And then it was interesting because what I remember when basically what that represented was that kids all across the country and then other parts of the world, but especially in the United States, all got cassette players in their rooms.
For sure.
So that's what was selling, cassettes. And then in the early, I say by 94, I think Christmas 94 maybe, every kid in America got a CD Walkman or something. Like they got a CD player.
Totally
true. Because I remember when we did, I think it was Red Medicine, this is Fugazi's Red Medicine record. We always had these long discussions about trying to guess how much to press. And I think on Killtaker, which would have been the record before, we'd sold, 150,000 cassettes. But it didn't feel like we were going to sell that many cassettes with Red Medicine. And so we really tried to be super conservative, guessing how many to press. So I think we pressed something like 40,000 or something. And and I remember that it just didn't sell. And at some point, we had something like 30,000 cassettes sitting in a warehouse. And I mean, I've asked this question to people before, but what do you call a record or a cassette that you don't listen to? What's another name for it?
You mean that you never listen to? It just sits around?
Yeah, it never gets listened to.
I mean, it's just like nostalgic crap at that point.
Right. It's a piece of fucking trash. It really is. And so when we press records, what we really are thinking about when we set pressings is that we realize that what activates these pieces of plastic, whether they're CDs or vinyl or cassettes or whatever, what makes them into something that has some power or some actual resonance is someone listening to it. So anything that you make that no one listens to, you're just adding to this enormous pile of garbage that already exists in the world. And so we've always tried to be very, very thoughtful about how many things to make. We don't want to make trash, period. It's, again, like it's only magical if someone's listening to it.
Was that really part of the thought process at that time?
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
So we were faced with these 30,000 some cassettes sitting in a warehouse, and I had been approached by some people in Poland who really wanted to reissue some of our records they wanted to reissue the record on cassette, and also some people in China who were talking about it. So we worked it out to sell them the cassettes we'd already had for 50 cents, which would have been
Nice.
cheaper than what they would have been able to make them, but it was more than we had paid for them, So
Right.
so that worked out. But it was really just seeing the bottom drop out on the cassette market was profound. And CDs just obliterated everything for a while.
Yeah, they did.
And then, of course, now digital has obliterated
Yes.
everything. And even though people talk about the vinyl renaissance, really, the vinyl renaissance, it's a pretty modest renaissance. I mean,
It is.
if we sell, I think right now the Cricky record has sold 6,000 or 7,000 copies vinyl, which is, for our purposes, great. But when you think about the fact that Repeater sold something like 250,000 copies, it kind of gives you a sense of the disparity between the actual physical item. I'm not actually a formatist. Like I don't
Right.
whatever. I don't care. The music, every song I ever wrote, I wrote to be heard.
Yeah.
That's the point. So
Well, I think that's proof positive by the massive Fugazi digital catalog on your website, right?
that's yes. Of course. But just in general, I think people.
What's funny about that, Ian? Larry Livermore, who we had on the show too, was talking about how he thought it was funny the way like modern punks will do like cassette tapes and like Kinko's flyers and stuff like that, because he's just like, that's just all we had. Like we weren't trying to be like cool.
Kitchen.
Yeah, right. It was just contemporary media at the time.
Right. It was what we refer to as the art of necessity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good take. Has obviously then digital has kind of changed how you all do things at the record label.
To some degree, sure. It's just it's just another way. I prefer, what I like about physical products is I like the frame.
Right.
I like having here's the record, the beginning to the end. Actually, it's funny with CDs when they came along. It took me a while to figure out what the flaw with CDs was as opposed to vinyl. Vinyl has two sides.
Yeah.
And usually they're 15 to 20 minutes a side. So it's easy to sit down and to really give a study to 15 or 20 minutes.
Right.
And then you can, next time you come and you put the second side on, you might listen to those. But CDs, you could fit 70 minutes worth of music. And so everyone put 70 minutes worth of music on there, and there was one side. And if I had been involved with the development of the CD player, I would have had two play buttons. And the second play button would have found the middle point of the CD. Because what you found was that when you sequence an album, a vinyl record, you think a lot about the beginning, the first song, the second song, for both sides. Like, what's the lead off song? But with a CD, it was just the first three songs. And then after that, it was like whatever else. They just kind of threw stuff in there.
Just kind of fluffed it.
Right. It just got, and they became, it's funny, especially when you listen to about a lot of the early hip hop records, you have the hits up top, and then it was just like 64 minutes of other stuff that no one can remember, and I think that it wears you out. Like an hour, just listening for an hour is hard.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that also changes how, if I think about my favorite CDs, I only kind of know the first 4 or 5 songs. Like when I all the vinyl records, I know the whole thing because I'd flip them and everything. But my first CDs were, like Elvis Costello's Spike and They Might Be Giants Flood, and it's the first 5 songs on both.
Right, and that's really, it was a really interesting development. Something that I didn't think about till later, because when CDs first came along as Discord, we were thinking, well, we can take advantage of this format by putting 2 records on each CD, because they were 70 minutes long. Some of the records were, so we were able to put, say, with Dag Nasty, we put the first record, Can I Say, and Wig Out, both on the same record.
Right.
We did that with a number. We called them maxi CDs. We'd charge $1 or more for them or something like that. In retrospect, it was, I think, a disservice to the individual albums.
Right.
But at the time, we were really thinking about it as like, well, how can we take advantage of this boutique format? How can we take advantage of it to actually offer some like economy to the? But in retrospect, I think it was a mistake, and we did try to actually, we reissued a lot of that stuff as separate CDs back when people bought CDs. Now with digital, there's just no frame at all, and it's really interesting because for those of us who make records, like we really think about this sequence. Like the Kariki record, we really thought about the sequence. Fugazi, we spent forever thinking about the sequence, like how the arc of the record, and which as an aside, I thought I'd bring this up, which I always thought was very interesting as well, which is, do you remember there was a series of bands would get back together and they would do these shows where they would play just their most famous record.
One record, yeah.
Right, that's one record.
Dr. Spill did that with Perfect From Now On.
Yeah. So and I mean, a number of bands did it. I saw Devo do it with...
Devo did it.
That's awesome.
Right, and it was cool, but I was watching and I go, this is so interesting because when you think about the arc of a record, like you have side A and side B, and the strong song usually is, the first couple songs on side A, or and then the first couple songs on side B. The last song on side B is usually sort of like here's another song. But at a show, the last song is the encore. It's supposed to quite typically. So when I was watching that show, they played the songs in order, and I thought it's just weird.
Because you know what the encore is going to be, right?
No, but now you know it. But it's just not it's like a toss. It's like an extra, like a song that wasn't. It was a song they didn't really expect anyone to hear.
Right.
But they
That's
sort
really
of
funny.
And it's really totally interesting. Like what happened. Like
what if he flipped the order when if you did live album concerts, he just did it like flipped.
You could. I mean, I imagine people did that. I only saw one or two of them. I saw the Devo one. I have to say the Devo one was here in DC, and it was incredible. They did the first record, I think. Oh. Yeah, it must have been the first record. And it was great, but it did have this weird ending. The last song was just the last song on side B, but they came out and did an encore of some of their other, like, Whip It, or I don't know, some songs that were more like hits.
More popular, yeah.
Right. And then they left the stage, and the show had only been on for like 50 minutes because a record is only 38 minutes long, right? Mm-hmm. And the people, I mean, I didn't pay to get in, but the tickets were like $50 or $60, whatever they were. So people were justifiably and understandably not happy.
Yeah.
Right. And there were more. And they started chanting more. And the lights went on and the crowd started chanting bullshit.
Oh, no.
And I was like, this is incredible. Like, what a scene, And then the Devo guys came back on stage in their street clothes. And they did Beautiful World.
Oh.
And Bougie Boy sang it.
Amazing.
And I talked to one of the guys who was working with them, and I said, do they do this every night? And he says, I don't know if they've ever done a show in their street clothes. But I think they thought the show was over. And I have to say, it was an incredible moment. Yeah. They brought it so... And it's a band, that's one of the bands, like early on, and I started seeing gigs in 79, and I could have seen Devo, but they were at that time, like we were being always ridiculed.
Right.
People would call us Devo, so we just thought like they were this terrible new wave band. And it's one of the bands that I really regret not seeing at that time. Yeah. I did see B-52s early on. I saw them right after the Yellow record, and that was an incredible show. Amazing show. But I didn't go see Devo, and I didn't see B-52s the next time because at that point, we were tired of being called Rock Lobster. So it was sort of like, but in retrospect, I really, really wish I had gone to see Devo because I think that they were much more, there was something going on there.
Incredible
much
band.
More serious.
I saw them at a little place called the Katati Cabaret. When I was 17, it was an 18 and over show, and my little brother, 16 at the time, talked us in at the door because he was just such a huge fan at that time. I mean, he was like obsessed with them.
What town was this?
Katati, right outside of Santa Rosa, just north of Petaluma area.
You're up that way, all right.
Yeah, I grew up in Santa Rosa. So, in fact, I saw Fugazi at the Phoenix Theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember the Phoenix Theater.
Amongst some other shows around that time. But
Santa Rosa, keeping it real.
yeah, that's right. That is right. Santa Rosa. And we had, we definitely took a lot of sort of lines out of the Discord playbook in terms of like putting out records. I had a little record label. We only put out stuff from our local bands, and it was fun. It was a fun time. I'm not going to lie.
What was your label called?
Well, I worked with Curb Dog, who did like a bunch of they did some Victims Family stuff, and then they did a bunch of bands that ended up on Lookout Records were on their label.
Like who?
Nuisance, One Man Running.
Yeah.
There was a few bands that, and then I was in a band called Siren up there. So we hit Brian, our singer, wrote for Maximum Rock and Roll at the time. So
Brian who?
Brian Zero.
Oh, I remember the name. Yeah.
Yeah. He did that. He did the whole article with Steve Albini about corporate invasion of the punk scene.
Right.
That big issue. Some of your friends are already this fucked.
Yeah.
So,
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a great little scene up there. Phoenix was a great place to play. We had a couple of local little cafes that would let us do shows, and I think I booked a Discord band called Los Mordidas to play at our studio.
Yeah, it was sort of Discord related. It was Doug and Chris and those guys. Yeah, they're a great band.
Yeah,
I think Santa Rosa had its own real unique. Like it was cool. Like that. The thing about, California is such a peculiar state because it really is like people I think largely think of sort of monolithically they think of California, but it is such a textured and wide variety of places, from south to north. And Fugazi we played a lot. We played Chico, we played up in Wairika, we did
Arcata.
Yeah, we did Arcata. At the Armory.
Arcata.
Oh, you did the Armory, that show?
Yeah, I went to that show, yeah.
What a mess that was. But
that was
yeah.
I think I might have even gone with Chris from Lookout to that show.
Wait, what happened? Can you tell one story? Like, why was that show a mess?
Oh, it was just in an armory, and it sounded terrible. And the kids up there,
at all.
Yeah, it was just a big, giant hangar, and Northern California punk kids at that time, they're pretty. There's some sketchy kids up there. It was just there's just sketchy kids everywhere, but Northern California had a really specific kind of sketchiness. I think that it was an interesting time. Those shows. We would play basically anywhere. I think I took a page out of the Black Flag playbook, which was, Black Flag would go out and do a loop around the country, and then they would, wash their clothes and get back in the van and do another loop, but play the next town over. So instead of playing Washington, they play Baltimore. Instead of playing, New York, they play Albany or whatever. It's like they would just play, and as a result, first off, it was really it was like a good inspiration in terms of coverage, but also it just meant that they had numbers for people, but also it kind of planted seeds. I have this, and it may not be true. I talked actually not so long ago. I spoke to Joey Shithead about this, but I have a sort of a theory about the way the American punk touring network developed, which was that in the very beginning, of course, the club scene was largely controlled by the industry. So the punk bands that came over, like largely bands like Say the Damned or even the Sex Pistols, they were coming through sort of major label stuff, and they were having regular agencies and stuff like that. So they were playing kind of traditional venues. So they would play New York and LA, or they play New York, LA, and San Francisco, or maybe they come to Washington if they want to do a warm-up gig or something. But it was very limited in their touring. The first band that really started to carve out a really unique kind of network was DOA from Vancouver. And I think they were just driven. Obviously, an incredible band, but just
great live band.
Yeah, they just wanted to play, and they were working with a couple of guys. And I can't remember which one. Maybe it was Laurie Mercer. I don't remember which one. There was a couple of different people they worked with, but one of them or both of them had some connection with the Revolutionary Workers' Party, which was a sort of communist, revolutionary communist workers' party, and the Yippies, essentially, like people involved with the Yippie movement in the late 60s, early 70s, and so they toured, and their places they played were largely these weird kind of radical spaces. So DOA played in Washington, D.C. In October of 1979 at a hippie kind of co-op place called Madam's Organ. It's one of my I don't know if you guys have regrets about missing shows, but I was sick that night. I was sick and I just couldn't go to the show. And it was, to this day, it's like I have a cassette of the show and I've listened to it so many times, and it's like one of the shows that I can't believe I wasn't there for it. But the fact that they came just blew us all away, that they came to Washington. And then Black Flag, they also come from this strong ethic of playing, but they were largely limited to the West Coast. But they made their way up to Vancouver. And I think DOA actually came to Los Angeles, and Dukowski and the other Black Flag people met them, and they said, you should come to Vancouver. So they went to Black Flag, made it to Vancouver. And I think, and I've actually verified this with Chuck Dukowski, the bass player of Black Flag and the person who booked a lot of the shows. I said, you went up there with a blank notebook, didn't you? And he said, definitely. So he just took all the numbers he could get for all these weird places and started and used that as like the beginning of his network. So he went out and played. Black Flag started touring in 1981. They made their first cross-country tour, and they came through, and they had got, and of course they were also, everybody was calling each other. Like I had called SST just because we love Black Flag so much, and they had a phone number on an ad, and I just called them in 1980 and said, like, hi, we're from Washington and we love your band. And we just became, we started talking, and we talk on the phone regularly. I may have even helped them, like, suggested they play a 930 club, whatever it was. But so we ended up having this kind of, it just developed. And then Dukowski, this keeps booking, Black Flag keep playing. And then when Minor Threat starts touring, he just gives me a list of phone numbers, right?
See, that's insane to me, because by the time, so I started going to shows in 92. I was a sophomore in high school. But by the time I started, so right around then, I also started hitchhiking around. And it didn't matter if you were hitchhiking or in a band. Like, my first time out of Santa Rosa by myself, I just had some phone numbers and some names that some punks had given me, my friends.
Right.
And I'm able to go to any town and call this number, and there's a punk house, there's shows, it was amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and I think it still exists, by the way. It's just not phone numbers. It's
email
now
addresses.
Yeah, it's email.
Facebook.
Yeah. People are still looking out. I think that, punk will never die. It might be called something different, but this sort of, the necessity for the underground, that always exists because the overground exists, Right. So it's still going on. And like, you were talking about 92, I'm talking about 79, 80, 81. Mm-hmm. And, it's just of different variations. Like there weren't, by 81, there were these punk houses, but they might have been a little different than the ones you were going to. Like, not this, I'm not saying, I'm sure they weren't the same houses, period. But but a slightly different. They weren't like house show. Like you were going to house shows, I imagine, to some degree.
Yeah. Basement shows. Right,
but we were like in every town there was a house where the punks lived, and that's where you stayed.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you would stay. So, and I think, and I could be wrong, but I think Discord House is the sole remaining part of that network. Like the actual, like it's still there. The building is there, and it's still basically the same. It's still Discord House. It's I've had it. It'll be 39 years in October, it's crazy. And I don't think. Some of the other structures might be there, but there's somebody else living, some family in there. I think it's a fucking cultural artifact at this point,
Yeah.
It's like a part of something. It's an invisible history. And
I've read just blog posts, random people that have called you guys or you and come out and just done a visit. that, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think there was a period of time where I think we must have been on some weird, you know, tour photo. Like everybody had to come get their picture on the porch or something.
Yes, it's true. It's true because I kept seeing that.
So
My
funny.
friends would do that too. Like I don't know what it was, but I've seen those photos.
Reenact the iconic photo of you guys.
Yeah.
Right. But what's interesting now, by the way, just, you know, is that I haven't had a single porch photo taken since February.
Well,
right.
yeah.
And
That
like,
makes sense.
and it's really interesting. Like you cannot imagine, like on any given summer day, usually, like I would say it would sometimes it could be people would show up every day just to take a picture on the porch. There would be times I would leave, I'd walk out the front door and there would be a bunch of people sitting on my porch. It's one of the reasons actually.
Okay?
It is okay. I would say of all the thousands of people that have come, there's been maybe one or two ne'er-do-wells. That's pretty good. That's pretty
not
good.
bad.
You know, and I will say though that one of the reasons, you know, I moved out of Discord House in 2003, and one of the reasons that I think I felt like I had to leave that house was that I had become a docent in my own house. You know, people would show up and I'd say, oh, yeah, well, here's this room, here's the office, here's where this happened. They're like, oh, my God, and that's the porch, and here's where we practice. But also sort of like, and here's where I shit. You know, it just felt weird. Like, it was my home, right? And to some degree, there was a sense that I felt like maybe I need to split this up, you know, because I had been living there at that point for 21 years or 21 years. It was just time to not live there. I love the place. I still, you know, I own it. I go out there, you know, usually 4 days a week or 5 days a week and work. And, you know, it's a great spot, but I'm glad I don't live there anymore.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, I could see where it would become almost like you know, like a sort of a, you're like tied to it in a way if you're living there and working there and you've got people stopping by constantly.
Right. And it gets
it's like working at Jim Morrison's grave.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
I'm not sure about that, but I think what's more interesting about it is sort of, for me, it was my home. And it didn't feel weird. Like, for instance, like where you live, you might leave something personal out on your table, for instance, or your desk, because it's your desk. You're not thinking that you're going to be giving tours to people, especially people who are maybe have an exaggerated interest in what you're up to. So they might survey the things on your desk and glean things, even if, you know, like maybe I had an experience many years ago where there was a Mormon guy, a kid, and he was a runaway, and he'd shown up at our house, and this is many, many years ago. And he was a nice, very nice kid. He had left the church, and he was pretty agonized about the whole situation. And as I recall, one of the things that he was specifically upset about was that he was really in love with this, you know, young woman but she was still in the church, and, you know, they couldn't be together because you have to be they'd have to be married. He'd have to return to the fold if they wanted to be married. Anyway, this was going on, and I think he actually left, came back. There's a couple of different times, and at some point he left for good. And I was, you know, I didn't have anything bad to say about the Mormon church. I just was trying to help him navigate. And I get a package in the mail from him. And in there's a letter, and it says, when you're ready for the truth, read this. And he had sent a Book of Mormon. Which meant, he had gone back. And of course, you know, he had gone back to the fold, which is fine for him.
Yep.
But I don't really need to have the truth explained to me, right? I know what the fucking truth is for me. So I was like, and I put it on my desk and thought about, I need to think about how I'm going to respond. I'm not going to know. So that's just my way. I did an interview at some point with somebody, a fanzine. They came by and they interviewed me. And when the issue came out, the interviewer said, oh, he's a Mormon.
Oh, no.
What?
Because he saw the Book of Mormon on my desk.
Oh, my God.
And then that explained like my ethics or whatever in his mind. And so this is where you start realizing like it becomes a really delicate kind of situation when your personal life is all tied up with where people come to look.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever notice, like if you ever seen interviews with me on a video or in a movie or something, almost always I'm sitting in the same place at Discord House. And if you check it out, I sit in a neutral corner. There's nothing in the background except those windows, and you might see a car parked. You might see some leaves out the window, but there's nothing behind me because I just realized that's the neutral corner where people can't try to figure out like what it is I'm reading or what, or whatever. So it just became my spot to do interviews. Plus it's good light.
Well, it's such an interesting perspective too, because I know I'm not really sure that I would want anyone taking a snapshot of my bedside table at any given time and see all.
That's
what I'm
funny,
reading.
Kevin, because I just realized if I ever get interviewed for some reason, I'm going to leave the weirdest books out now.
Because who knows? Because I read a lot of different things about a lot of different things, and I'm an avid reader. I just and I've actually read part of the Book of Mormon. But I'm certainly not a Mormon.
Right. There's no issue. That's the thing. There's no issue. It's mostly how they're interpreting things. It's their filters. That's all.
Well, and in some ways, I guess you could see where it would line up. I mean, given the fact that they're like the no drugs or smoking or drinking, like they would be. Oh, of course, because people want to look for something that makes more sense to their brains, other than that's just your ethos, right? Like it's such an easy.
I think it's beyond. It's just the way it's just who I am. It's not that. Yeah. I mean, so I think that. I think there's human beings like to connect the dots.
They do.
Yeah, and I'm not mad. Honestly, I'm not even mad. I'm happy. I hope I never heard from that guy again, the Mormon guy. Right. I hope his life is good. Like I don't wish ill on anybody. I'm not even really mad at the interviewer. What I came away with was this was a lesson about how like I think I'm a thoughtful person about how I conduct my affairs and there are a lot of times where I make a decision about how to approach something, which is really largely based on the idea that I don't want to spend a lot of time later on explaining it because it's a waste of time having to sit there and like, no, you misunderstood this. I mean, one thing I can't stand is when people float nonsense rumors that then I have to deal with.
Right.
It just drives me nuts because I have other things to do. I don't want to have to explain. No, I can't. I mean, I'm not going to make any examples right now. But there have been over the years a number of hoaxes or things that then I have to like. People will call me and they're like, "What happened? Or what's going on?" I'm like, "Okay, here's the situation," and it's just ridiculous. I mean, I'll give you a good example. Actually, here's an example. Some years ago. A local, the weekly paper here, contacted somebody at Discord and saying, "Hey, we hear." So maybe somebody did a blog thing about the fact that Urban Outfitters are selling Minor Threat shirts, and so the weekly, because they're so starved for stories. I guess, you have the content, damn it. They called and they said, "Is this true? Can we verify this?" And I mean, it was true, but the Minor Threat shirts had been selling in Urban Outfitters for, I don't know how long, because I don't care. It's not, basically the way it works is that each band decides for itself how they want to proceed in terms of merchandise. Mm-hmm. So in the case of Fugazi, we do not make merchandise. In the case of Minor Threat, it's a democracy. I was outvoted. So fair enough. I don't have any problem with it. And there was a company that made these T-shirts, and they sell the shirts to whoever they sell them to. It doesn't matter to me because I think they're ridiculous anyway. Like I don't wear band shirts. And I mean, I think if a band makes some shirts and they want something to get them down the road, cool. I'm all for it. But if people are buying clothing as a status symbol, I find that not so interesting. So this reporter kept calling, going like, "Well, can you verify?" And then I think I just wrote back. It's like, I told the guy, just tell him, yes, whatever. And then they wanted to comment. And finally she called a couple times, and I just picked up the phone and called her. Or she was texting or writing or whatever. So I called her and I said to her, I don't care. Like, I just don't care about this. It's not important. I go, I don't know why, like, to me, I don't know why it makes more sense for someone to pay $16 for a shirt in a punk boutique versus someone who pays $30 in an Urban Outfitters. I don't know why. It all seems ridiculous to me, and I just don't care. So then the headline was, MacKaye doesn't care, decides to sell shirts in Urban Outfitters.
Oh my God. That must be so hard for you, because it sounds like, I don't know you. I've just met you, but you seem like you're pretty easygoing and thoughtful, and you just have a direction you go in that feels good to you. But because of your position as a semi-famous person in these bands and everything, like, every little move you make is part of this bigger, like, people have made a movement out of just like your casual interests or your
I don't know if they're casual, but yes.
Yeah. Right.
I
sorry, not casual, but it's just like you said, it's just who you are.
It's just, look, I'm trying to be provocative. Like, the songs I've written, I mean them. I meant them when I wrote them, and I mean them still. I stand behind my lyrics. And, I also was, learning about how best to communicate. When you're, I have a 12-year-old son. The way he communicates is pretty different than the way I communicate as a 58-year-old, right? Yeah. When I was 18 or 17 or 18 or 19 years old, I chose ways to communicate that have evolved, of course. When, like, with Minor Threat, for instance, when I wrote a song, what I thought was, if I write a lyric that is so direct, like just to the point, that people would not be able to misinterpret it. That was the idea. Just say it exactly the way it is, and that way there's no wiggle room. They have to understand it. What I didn't understand at the time, which I didn't grasp at the time, is that when you make a hammer, you can use that hammer to build something, or you can use it to kill somebody.
Right.
So what I essentially had done was I had presented to people finished ideas. And I would say the vast majority of the people who engaged those ideas did good things with them. And some people did things that were not so good with them. Mm-hmm. But I can't control it once it's out.
No, you can't.
Transmission, sure. Reception, that's out of my hands. That's other people. So then, as I developed and evolved, I realized, don't make, like, if you think of songs, as like clothing, or that some of the early songs were like uniforms, and anybody could just slip them on and use them for their purposes.
Which is great when you're a teenager, right? Because you're looking for an identity package that's easy, that you can just go, okay, here's the rules, let's go.
Right. So if you think about, for instance, religion, any religion, people can take a religious concept and they can slip it on and use it for good or for ill.
Yeah.
Right. So, and same with nationalism, right? I mean, that's a perfect example of, like, people, you can use it for good or for ill. So, I was like, oh, I see. Like, I created uniforms or clothing that people could slip on and wear. So by the time I was in Fugazi, I was thinking, create quality fabric and make people make them work, make them have to put some investment in this, so it's not something they can just slip on.
Oh, geez. Wow.
That was sort of the idea. So it was an evolution. So, but I've always tried to provoke some thought. So when you say casual, no, not casual.
Sorry, that was a
fucking meant it, and was trying to get a rise out of people. I'll take the lump for that. That was on me. And, and in some ways there's things about, there's some things that have been like, all right, well, that ended up being a lot more work than I intended, but that's all right. It is what it is.
So, I mean, it sounds to me like, to some degree, too, the delivery has changed, not so much the process. Like you still are intending to make sure that the things you're saying you mean, obviously, but also to elicit a response from whoever's listening to it. But the method is not quite as in your face as it once was. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that because it's funny with the evens, for instance, because of people's sort of relationship with, or their grasp of what is aggressive or whatever, that, they think, oh, it has to be loud and it has to be fast, whatever. And they quite often would dismiss the event, or sort of, I would say, or subtly dismiss it as sort of, they'd say, oh, it's sort of a folk thing or an indie rock thing. But in my mind, the evens, like, you're in a room like inches away from the people making the music, and there's no barrier whatsoever. It's not like, there's that famous thing about, oh, with punk, we break down the barrier between the audience and the band. But they go see them at clubs and there's a barrier there,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But the evens, like, there was nothing. Like, it was like right there. And I would say that the presentation was so naked that, to me, that was super in your face.
Yeah.
But I think that people, again, like, there's like, it just depends on how, if you define punk, for instance, as, fast and loud and, chewing bubble gum, spiked hair, I don't know, whatever it is people think makes something punk, probably not what I think is punk. I think punk is the free space where the new idea gets to be presented, without profit calling the shots.
For sure.
Right. So that, to me, that's punk. So when I see a band or a musician or an artist do something that is really mind-blowing, it is so challenging, I don't care what form it takes.
Right.
To me, that's in my face because they're presenting a new idea. Now, part of the problem that Evans ran into is that I was in a band. It was blessing and a curse, the blessing and a curse, because I think that people have been trying to understand, largely they always look at my tail.
Right.
They always look at the tail and they're like, oh yeah, oh, look, minor threat or whatever. And then they try to understand what this thing is based on the tail. But that's behind me.
Not this podcast. What are you doing next week?
Yeah, exactly. We're always curious about that.
I never think about the future.
What are you doing?
So talking about the evens and then rolling into Kuriki, like, how is that? And I know it's kind of a generic question. Actually, no, it's not. It's a real question. How is it working with your wife on these creative projects? You two are obviously very close and have known each other a really long time beyond being married.
Oh yeah.
And so, I mean, every couple has their moments, good and bad. And you two are doing, like, you were touring together in the evens, writing together. Yeah. Now you're not touring for obvious reasons, but writing together in Kuriki. And it seems like it's a very, at least from what I could read and hear on the record in terms of there's multiple people doing vocals. It seems like a very all-in participatory band. Like, everybody's there to contribute. And how is that process, working and playing and living with your partner?
Well, that's good. I mean, Amy and I have known each other for getting towards 30 years now.
Yeah.
And we like each other.
Obviously.
We made a person together. So, it's and I think that, I understand when people say, oh, couples have their moments. Sure. And so do friendships.
Yes.
I mean, moments are moments. And, but I would say by and large, like, our commitment to music and to creation, the three of us, not just me and Amy. I mean, Joe's right in there too. And I mean, don't forget, I lived with Joe for 12 years.
Yeah.
And I was in a band with him he was the first person in Fugazi with me. Yeah. I mean, Joe and I started playing together in September of 1986. And we played with another drummer. Colin Sears from Dag Nasty for about until December. And then he went back to Dag Nasty, and we needed a drummer. And Brendan was practicing at Discord House with, I think he's still in One Last Wish. He might have just been starting Happy Go Lucky at that point. And we just asked if you just want to sit in with us. We kept saying we're not forming a band. We just want to play music. And that's always been the way. We just want to play music. So the same way when Joe came back from Italy in 2015, I said, "Do you want to play music?" And he said, "Yes." And we've been playing together. The three of us have been playing together since 2015.
Yeah.
We just play and play. And we actually have been playing straight through the pandemic. We played.
That's great.
We played Monday. I think we're going to practice tomorrow. We just play. We get together, the three of us, and we just play music together. And at some point we decided, well, I guess we should do a show. And the first shows we did actually were these. We would just invite friends over, and we'd hand them basically a list of our songs. Said, pick a song, we'll play it for you. And we have like 3 people there, and we did like maybe 5 or 6 of those.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, wow.
It's just like we call it it was like a public practice. The idea was to sort of figure out, because we've been practicing for ourselves forever. We need a way to kind of like, oh yeah, how do you play this live, like in front of other people? And then we did a couple of shows with no name. In fact, our first show, I think, we called it an open practice. Come join Ian, Amy, and Joe for an open practice, and 500 people came. And then we did, and then at some point, the name Cricky came up. Actually, Brendan Canty was the one who gave us that name. I've got a little backstory
on that because we interviewed Dunstan, right?
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. All right.
Is that the British version of Liar's Dice? Is that correct?
It is, but but we didn't learn from Dunstan. We learned it from a British guy. Yeah. But it wasn't Dunstan. That's funny. We may have taught Dunstan it, though. Did he say he knew it?
He just said that he actually didn't fully know where it was learned, but he knew Fugazi loved playing it.
Oh, yeah.
So he wasn't going to fully take credit. He wasn't like, oh, I taught them. But he said, I believe they learned it maybe at a squat somewhere. I'm just not positive.
Yeah, we learned it from there was a band called Thatcher on Acid.
Yes.
We were touring with them. They're great friends. We had a great time with them. And we were playing a show in, I think it was Den Haag in the Netherlands. Might have been Rotterdam. I'm not sure. It was one of those two. And it was like I remember it was like a anti-fascist festival or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But I went backstage, and the Thatcher and Acid guys were all sitting around a table slamming a cup down and yelling at each other. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And they said, we're playing this game. You want to play? And I sat down, and they taught me the rules. It's a Liar's Dice game. And I won the first time I played, I won.
Wow, that was it.
And when the game was over, I took the 2 die and I put them in my pocket. And I carried those things with me until about 5 years ago when someone stole this little bag I had out of my jacket. But those I carry those dice everywhere because you always need to have a pair of dice in case a game of cricky might break out.
Wait. When you lost your bag with your dice in it, did your luck turn? Did everything just go to shit?
No, it's not about, no, it wasn't luck.
Okay.
It was just, here's the thing about items you carry. I've carried items with me, and they might be, they're tokens, but what they really are is they're story starters. That's all they are. You pick them out and go, yeah, like here's a story about that. Like, otherwise they're just things you carry around with you. I didn't attach any. The only bad luck was that someone stole a bag with a bunch of like some money and some other things in it. I was sad about that, but what I did. After I was in New York City and I searched all the trash cans and looked everywhere and didn't have any luck with it. I sat down and I wrote up an exhaustive list of contents, including the story behind all the things in that bag.
Oh.
So that's essentially that's what these little items are for.
Right.
They're just memories encased in an object. And if you lose the object, then write down the memory while you still have it.
Right.
Jot it down. Now, the name Kuriki came about initially, we were the evens, and we thought, of course, we'll be the odds because it just seemed like the perfect name, the odds. But at some point, I looked online, I did an internet search, and discovered that there was quite a few bands called the Odds, including one from Canada that were successful, and they're called Odds, or I think they're called Odds. And I read in their Wikipedia entry that at one point I think they had broken up, and then some of the guys took the name and put out a record under that name, and the other guys got back together, but then they had to actually sue to get the name back. And even I saw that it was a contentious issue. And another strange thing about me is that though I don't think of myself as, hugely successful or whatever, like I don't think I'm not like a Mick Jagger guy or something, but I'm newsworthy. So in the blogosphere, right? Like in the internet world, for some reason, it's newsworthy. So if I called a band called if I say I have a band called the Odds, people who have proprietary sense about that name, they would be maybe alerted to that. Like, my name is Ian. Do you know how many people are called Ian in the world? We seem to be right. We seem to be doing fine, right? But with bands, there's this weird commercial component to it, which can be a little frustrating. So we just left that. We're like, there's no point in getting involved. Like, we thought Odds DC but it just seemed, let's just leave it. And then Brendan had said early on, you should call your band Kuriki, because in Kuriki, the winning roll is 3. Mm-hmm. That's the trump. That's the thing that wins every time. I'm really disturbed by the fact that word has been so soiled. But Trump, that is. But it just bothers me that
talk about that.
I know, but we're not going to. But I just want to say that I feel like that word, I wish it could be reclaimed, because that's such a perfect word. The trump card, the thing that just wins. It's complicated, and maybe we need to come up with. Maybe I'll have to get a thesaurus out and try to find a different word. But in the beginning, we were like, it's cool, but who wants to have to explain what it means the whole time? Like, we got it from a dice game. But at some point, we needed a name, or it's going to be Ian's new band, right?
Right.
And we're like, I'll just do it Kuriki. And it turned out that Kuriki was kind of brilliant because, we were brilliant, but the name is brilliant because, first off, it's not online. Like, you get 0 hits online, which is great. But the even better is that nobody knows how to spell it. Everybody has a different spelling. And I even called Ben Corrigan, the person who taught it to me, right? The guy from Thatcher and Acid, who was sort of the person that actually explained to me the rules of I said, how do you spell it? He's like, I have no fucking idea, right? And nobody knows how to spell it. And I've seen so many, Queericky, Kirik, everyone has different spelling. So it just becomes even more, you can't get a hold of it. It just slips away from you every time. I love it.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's a great story. I mean, and that's, I think that even just hearing that you wrote down the story of each of those objects, and I think that's one of the things that's in many ways been lost, like storytelling, right? Like it just is such a great and amazing. It's its own art form.
Let me see if I can find. Hold on a second. Let me see if I have it. I might have that. It was stolen in 2016. And this is a thing called an attempt to inventory the contents of Ian's stolen bag. All right. So here's the entry about the dice. A pair of dice. These dice were from the first Kuriki, no one knows how to spell this, game I ever played. Keep in mind, this is written in 2016, long before the band. Mm-hmm. This occurred backstage at a show at a venue called Unitas in Wageningen, Netherlands. That's where it was, on September 8th, 1990. We were playing with a British band called Thatcher and Acid, whose members we've been friends with for a couple of years. Ben Corrigan was the guitarist and singer. Big Sean was the bass player, and Andy was the drummer. At some point in the evening, I came across them sitting at a table playing a boisterous game of dice. When I asked what the game was, they told me it was Kuriki. and they gave me a quick lesson and invited me to sit in the next round. It's a game of liar's dice, and though I'd never played anything like it, I ended up winning the first game I played. Standing up from the game, I put the dice in my pocket, and they rode with me for the next 26 years. Fugazi played many, many games of Kariki and taught it to a number of other people, most notably Steve Albini, who then taught every band that came through his studio. For years, it seemed like an obsessive activity for many of the touring bands that came through town. Last year, 2015 that is, Ben Corrigan came through Washington with Johanna Newsom. He's our tour manager. And Amy and I stopped by to say hello to him. He was stunned when I produced the pair of dice.
Whoa.
What a great story.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Sure.
We're actually right up on an hour right now.
Did you ask me any of the questions you wanted to ask me?
No, I don't give a shit about them. I'm going to be totally honest. This has been an absolute joy. You're a national treasure.
Seriously, this has been I love this conversation. It's been fantastic.
I feel like, and the reason we do, I don't think we even talked to you about this, or I didn't email you about it because I was so just trying to get you to come on the show. The reason we do this is to give people some kind of, inspiration or have them feel good after they listen to it. That's why we try not to talk about a lot of politics. We have had a couple kind of more political people on.
Wait, what?
we try not to get down about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And next week, Antifa is on.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is we try to spin positive out of it. Right.
Correct. Yes.
And
absolutely.
So, I just the questions are, you covered most of it in different ways anyway. So if I would have phrased the question, it wouldn't have come out the way that you answered it already. So it's kind of useless to some degree. I think, I will encourage people to listen to that record. It's your new record. It's fantastic. It's really
By the
good.
way, according to Wikipedia, it is Coriky.
Because that's based on us.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. According to your Wikipedia. Sorry. Yeah. According to your Wikipedia.
And but Amy chose that spelling.
That's so amazing.
In my journal entry here, there's this contents of a bag, stolen bag. I spell it K-O-R-I-C-K-Y, I think. Let me see how I spelled it. Hold on a second. Yeah, I spelled it K-O-R-I-C-K-Y. But Amy, I love her so much. She said, I think I'm going to start with a C. She goes like, you never want to put two Ks in a word together because a third one might show up. And, and I thought that was such a brilliant, you want to keep the Ks, you don't want too many Ks in one place. So she decided to look better, and it doesn't matter. Really. It's just a name. The English language is really interesting that until I would say, I don't know what year, I wish I could date it exactly, but until not that long ago, spelling, there was no real mandatory spelling. The whole point of letters and spelling was to give somebody, to be able to communicate to somebody what the word was. So if you look at
symbol.
Right. So you look at old, like in the 19th century early, you'll see, shop spelled with two P's and the E or whatever. People had spelled any way they wanted to spell. They just spelled things. And actually the only area in life now that you still see this in practice is in names.
Yeah.
Think about the way people spell the name like Jennifer, Gennifer, Jennifer, Jennif, Jyn. I mean, it's like that's the one area where like it's just the sound. It's put across the sound, and so spelling is sort of it became sort of mandated at some point because, or what's the word I'm looking for when you became there was a governance
standardized.
Yeah, standardized, right. It was a time probably. I wonder if it had to do with the way things were being printed, or when press started coming in and books were being made.
Right.
It's really interesting. So in some ways, like we may well change the spelling of our name on our next record, because especially now, the internet is so absolutely like the ones and zeros require that kind of accuracy, right? Like, if you have...
They do, though. You're reminding me now that text has very much gone the way of spell things however you want.
Yes. Yeah. But if you think about, if you're searching something on the internet, if you spell it wrong, it may guess it, but a lot of times you're out of luck, so it's an interesting, but that's, it's the weather. Dress accordingly. That's all I can tell you. That's the way it is in life. And I just want to say one thing, just in terms of the political situation.
Sure, please.
And I said this right after the inauguration. It's a giant ship we live on, right? And crazy people are at the helm, right?
Yep.
And they may well try to steer this thing into the fucking, like into a tree or do something. And they might think they can really steer the direction of it. But the tide, the current, they can't control that.
Right.
And the current goes forward. And that's progress. And these motherfuckers think they might be in control of things. No, they're not. We are. And it will move progressively in the right direction. It's just going to be a little bit frantic on the way.
Yeah. Well, that's
well put.
That's about as perfect as we could call the night. So, Ian, seriously, thank you so much.
Sure.
I mean, it really super great conversation. Exactly what we'd love to do, and just let people talk and not try to direct too much. So, like what you were saying, let the tide go where it goes.
Right.
So,
and thanks for your patience. I know it took us months, but it's the way it is with me. But I really, we got to fucking get this thing done, because I just kept like, I'll get there. But the problem is me. I really, like I said earlier, I don't care about the future. It's true. I don't. I just do the day. Yeah. So I don't ever.
It all worked out.
Yeah. So for me, I always think like, we'll just do that. I'll have plenty of time tomorrow or next day or next week. And then I get to the next week, I'm like, but it's today and I'm busy. So it's just the way my mind works. But I do try to, if I say I'm going to do something, I try to do it.
Yeah.
That's my thing. And it just takes a while. So I appreciate your patience on that.
But I told you we're flexible, and it worked out. So I'm really glad it did. I feel it's, this isn't an easy time at certain times, and it just feels good to be able to do this. This is a really good artistic release right now. My band is not practicing because we're all over the country.
Yep.
So for me to do this is a really good format to kind of get some stuff out as well, and listen to people that really inspire me. So I totally appreciate it.
I can dig it. Yep. Cool. All right.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.